Welcome everyone. Good to be with you. And we'll take some moments to sit together. So I just invite you to come into a posture that's relaxed and at the same time alert. So you might sit with your back straight. Just invite the shoulders to relax and settle. You can let your hands rest wherever it's comfortable, in your lap or on your knees or on your thighs. If you like, you could let your eyes gently close, let the attention come inward. Or if you prefer, you can just have a soft focus looking a little bit ahead of you, whatever's comfortable for you. And you might consciously put aside thoughts about the future, thoughts about the past, and just have the intention to be as fully here with your experience, here together for this time of meditation. So you might let your attention drop down into the body. Just feel the weight of the body pressing down on the buttocks, on the thighs, on the feet. Kind of dropping out of the thinking mode, the discursive, cogitating kind of mode we're in a lot of the time. And just let yourself be here, aware of the body. And you might find it helpful to take a few longer, deeper breaths as a way of just helping you settle into being here. A nice full deep in-breath, filling the lungs, filling the chest, and just releasing long, slow out-breath. Again, a nice full deep in-breath. A long, slow out-breath. Breathing in, calming the body. Breathing out, calming the mind. And let this conscious breathing help you settle as much as you can right now as we begin the meditation. The breath can be a wonderful resource just to bring us back into the present. Here, breathing in, I know I'm here. Breathing out, I know I'm here. And the Buddha spoke about the benefits of gladdening the mind, kind of bringing some joy into the mind and into the heart. And one way we can do this is to consciously invite a smile to the face, to the corners of your eyes, corners of your mouth. Maybe thinking of somebody who makes you feel happy or joyful, or a place or a time. If you can just take in the feeling of a smile. letting the smile relax the brain and the nervous system. You might invite the smile down into the body, into the heart area. And let the smile be the attitude or expression that you want to bring to the moment, to the day. Just meeting the moment with the attitude or expression of a smile. You might also just think of something or a few things in your life that you feel grateful for right now. Maybe things you might normally take for granted, loved ones or dear friends, pet. The wonders of nature, the creatures, the trees, the red buds, the cherry blossoms. Perhaps our religious or spiritual practice, how we can be grateful for that. Gratitude invites us into an attitude of joy, of appreciation for what we have. Meister Eckhart said, if the only words you said in your life were thank you, that would be enough. Just thank you. When we're grateful, we can't at the same time be caught up in afflictive states, fear, stress, worry, anger. Come back to the appreciation of what we have. Whenever you're ready, just settling into being here and opening to what is present for you right now in this moment. Whatever's here in the body, in the heart, in the emotions, in the mind. Can you make space for what's here? Not resisting or clinging, just letting everything be as it is. Let it come and go. The invitation in meditation is to welcome all of our experiences. In the words of the poet Rumi, to welcome the guests, and welcome the experiences as though they're guests coming to visit, stay for a while, and then to leave. The invitation is not to get in the way, not to hold on to some experiences and push away others. But just make space for everything to come and to go in its own time. So nothing is excluded or left out. An invitation to turn towards what's difficult, if that's what's calling for our attention, just to make space for it. Let the sensations, feelings, thoughts just come, let them be, let them go. And if it's helpful, you could let your breathing be an anchor for your awareness, a kind of home base where you rest your attention. And then when the mind goes off, as it will, just to come back, in breath and out breath. Whenever we notice that we're off somewhere else, we're thinking about something that happened, or we're planning for something in the future, thinking about something going on elsewhere, we can just notice it, not to make it a problem that the mind's gone into thought, just to notice that's what the mind does. You know, it's a training, and we've often kind of trained ourselves to be in our heads and in our thoughts. So it's a training to just come back, just notice and come back to the body, come back to the breath, come back to this moment. this moment without judgment. Just find the peace that is always available, always here, already here, always here, right now. As Dorothy Hunt says, peace is this moment without judgment. This moment in the heart space where everything that is welcome. Without judgment, without resistance, without clinging. This moment can always be a moment of peace, a moment of freedom. Just these last couple of minutes of the meditation, you might just appreciate all of us being here together. Just this gift of us all in our different places, in some cases many thousands of miles apart, being able to be together with a shared intention to wake up, to live more freely, more peacefully. To support each other in community. We'll finish off with a prayer of Shantideva, who was an 8th century Buddhist monk in India. Played a major role in the development of the archetype, the ideal of the Bodhisattva, someone committed to the freedom of all beings. He says, "May I become at all times, both now and forever, a protector for those without protection, a guide for those who have lost their way, a ship for those with oceans to cross, a sanctuary for those in danger, a lamp for those in the dark, and a servant to all those in need. As long as living beings exist and suffering afflicts them, may I too abide to dispel the misery of the world. May I too abide to dispel the misery of the world." take your time opening your eyes, kind of reorienting yourself to the external mode, and coming back together. Welcome again, everyone. So to begin, it goes without saying that for many of us, these are very difficult, very challenging times to live in. I've lived here for almost 50 years, and I don't remember a time quite like this. You know, there have definitely been difficult times, but just in so many ways, things that we value and care about dearly are very much, you know, threatened, and just a time of real challenges. And you know, I say often, you know, I find it hard to imagine how I would be able to meet these times without the practices, the teachings, the practices of, you know, broadly what we call the Dharma, you know, the mindfulness, but all of the other skills and practices of loving kindness and equanimity and joy, and, you know, the ability to kind of negotiate and navigate the times we're living in, or whatever times we're living in. And now, and I just heard today of some questions that Tara Brach had raised, you know, in this same kind of arena of just the times we're living in, and how the teachings and practices can support us. And this was for training that she and Jack Cornfield have been doing for a number of years. A number of our own teachers have been through the training or a part of it. And she, the way she put it was, as teachers, it's essential to honor our own grief while also guiding our students through the emotions they face. And then the questions she raised are, how do we find equanimity when core values and rights are under threat? How do we open our hearts to the cruelty and suffering of our times without becoming overwhelmed? How do we move beyond blame and see the shared vulnerability and conditioning in all beings? Most importantly, how do we stay present with what's unfolding and respond with wisdom, courage, and love? I think these are really beautiful questions, because they ask us, you know, how does our practice, how does these teachings support us in these times, help us kind of navigate these very, very difficult times that we're living in? And what I want to talk about today is one of what I think is one of the most helpful paths, practices within the Buddha's teachings to help us to be in the midst of the fire, as it were, but without being overwhelmed, you know, to be able to engage and respond to the, you know, these questions. How do we meet this time? How do we respond with wisdom and courage? How do we move beyond blame and judgment and kind of the tendency to get into us and them? And the path that I'm referring to is the path of what's called the path of the Bodhisattva. It's a wonderful training and wonderful practice. I'm actually teaching a 5-month program, and some folks here are part of that, called embodying the Bodhisattva path in these challenging times. The name is named, and I just want to today flag, you know, some of the, you know, what's at the heart of the Bodhisattva path. And I want to highlight particularly the fact that we can find bodhisattvas in many different traditions, even though it's a Buddhist archetype. We can find bodhisattvas in many traditions. Obviously, you know, we could think of in Buddhist kind of world, we could think of the Dalai Lama, you know, we could think of Thich Nhat Hanh. But in other traditions as well, you know, we can think of people, you know, the kind of figures, you know, from the civil rights movement, to me, kind of embody these teachings and practices. And I'll talk today particularly about Dr. Martin Luther King, but others as well, you know, Rosa Parks and John Lewis, and the many kind of people who may be less known, and also the millions who engaged in that, you know, really historic struggle that has many lessons for our time. And I kind of want to at least touch on this this today, on the path of the Bodhisattva. I shared a story of I've shared it elsewhere, of a monk, a Cambodian monk, Mahagosananda, who was a great leader in that country in the aftermath of the genocide of the Pol Pot regime in Cambodia in the mid and late 1970s. And his name was Mahagosananda, and he came to Washington to support a campaign to ban landmines, eradicate landmines from the earth. You know, the idea being that if everybody agreed that you wouldn't use landmines, then, you know, many lives would be saved, and you know, that those horrific kind of casualties of war would be limited or minimized. And he stood on the steps of the Capitol. It's about 25 years ago, and he said something that really stuck with me over the years. He said, if we are to eradicate the landmines from the earth, we need to eradicate the landmines from our own hearts. And to me, this speaks to, you know, the relationship between kind of our inner practices and, you know, how we act in the world and what, you know, what happens in the world. You know, we can see in some ways that much of the collective suffering in the world coming from war and racism and inequality and, you know, the unconsciousness that leads us into the climate crisis we're in, that it comes from not having kind of done the inner work of the heart. It's kind of like it's a projecting outwards of our problems. You know, I often share the line from Blaise Pascal that, you know, all of humanity's misfortunes come from our inability to sit quietly in a room alone. You know, if we're not able to sit quietly in a room alone, then what we tend to do is we act out our fears, we act out our anger, you know, on others in the world, and that can manifest as conflicts and othering of people, you know, separation and all of that. Sometimes it's directed inward at ourselves in terms of self-judgment and self-hatred and all of that. So these practices are very much about being willing to sit quietly in a room alone and transforming our hearts in that way. And so that we have to I mean, one way of saying it is we have to change both the inner and the outer. We have to transform our own hearts and help to transform the suffering around us in the world. And the path of Bodhisattva, as I'm said, is one of the most important trainings in the Buddha's in Buddhist traditions. And the word Bodhisattva means, it's two words, a compound word. Bodhi means awakening, and sattva is a being who is awakened or who is on the path to awakening. You know, as somebody who's committed to freedom, freeing their own heart. But it has the other dimension or extra dimension that it's not just freeing ourselves, but seeing our interconnectedness with all of life and having at the center of our practice and of our life the wish to alleviate the suffering of all beings. So not just to see it as like, okay, my awakening. And in some ways, the Bodhisattva ideal came as something of a reaction to what was felt in, among people in early Buddhism as too much of a focus on quote, quote, my awakening, your awakening. If I could free myself, well, in theory, I could do all of these practices, and if I do them skillfully and intentionally, then I'd find greater and greater freedom, and then I could live like a nice peaceful life. But what about the world? And we, as that song says, we are the world. The world is in us, and we're in the world. And the Bodhisattva ideal was to kind of really acknowledge our interconnectedness with all of life, and to see our own awakening as completely bound up with the freedom of others, the awakening of all beings. And so, in a kind of religious sense, how the Bodhisattva ideal is expressed is that somebody awakens their own heart, becomes completely free of clinging and hatred and all of that, but chooses to stay in the world of suffering, the world of samsara, the world of what's called endless wandering, going over and over again, reproducing the suffering, because we haven't found a way out. So remaining in that world until we've helped liberate all beings. So it's very this compassionate ideal that we bring to the center of our lives, that we kind of put at the center, not just how do I deal with my fears, all of that. That's essential and important, but as part of freeing all beings. So the Bodhisattva vow is, there's a different framing of it, but one way of saying it is sentient beings are numberless. I vow to save them all. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to eradicate them all. The gates of the Dharma are limitless. I vow to enter them all. The Buddha's way is inconceivable. I vow to attain it. So it's kind of putting out this sense of it's impossible. There's so many people, they're numberless, yet I vow to save them all. It's a kind of very much an ideal, a vision. But what it really points to is that commitment, the wish to alleviate the suffering, bringing the wish to alleviate the suffering of all beings really to the center of our consciousness, rather than having our own self-interest be at the core, looking at everything through the lens of me and mine, to look at it look at our life through the lens of how can I be of support? How can I help ease suffering? How can I help alleviate suffering? And so at the heart of the Bodhisattva teachings and path is a commitment to the inner and the outer, transforming our own hearts and helping alleviate the suffering of the world, bringing compassion into our lives, into the world. And again, at the heart of the Bodhisattva understanding is that we are all awakening beings, that no one is excluded. We all have the capacity to wake up, each one of us. No matter how much we might be caught up in ignorance and confusion and doing things to harm other people, we all have that capacity to wake up. Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen teacher, renowned teacher who died 3 or 4 years ago, he spoke about everyone as having seeds within us. We have seeds of anger and cruelty and hatred, but we also have seeds of love and joy and compassion, equanimity, all of these qualities. And our happiness and our freedom depend really on which seeds we water. You know, if we water the seeds of anger, and we know people, we look into our political world today, we can see people who have very, very much watered the seeds of anger and separation and us and them and greed, you know, and not to see that so much from a judging point of view, but just recognizing that their suffering and the suffering that they bring into the world comes from having watered, you know, seeds that aren't going to lead to happiness for them or for anybody else. And kind of they're mired in their own suffering, and then they bring that suffering to others and into the world. And we also see many people who, you know, who have clearly watered the seeds of joy and compassion and love. You know, hopefully our reason for being here and at these kind of activities is to water those seeds, to nurture, to cultivate those seeds that will help us be more happy, help us be more free, but also to help us act in the world in a way that will help to alleviate the suffering of the world, that help us to address the challenges we all face together. You know, and so the heart of the Bodhisattva path and understanding is to see that there really isn't us and them. You know, yes, you know, there are people, you know, doing things that are harmful, but it's not, you know, it's not because there's good people and bad people. I'm going to share some quotes today from Martin Luther King. This is one of, you know, a really important reflection he has. He says, you know, our job, you know, our aim should never be to humiliate our opponents, you know, the white man, but to win their friendship and understanding. We must make it clear that it is injustice which we seek to defeat, and not persons who happen to be unjust. He says, we have before us the glorious opportunity to inject a new dimension of love into the veins of our civilization. He says, our motto must be freedom and justice through love, not through violence, not through hate. And the end of our struggle is reconciliation. The goal is reconciliation. The end, he says, is redemption. The end is the creation of the beloved community. The end is the creation of the beloved community, a community that's based in love and compassion, forgiveness, you know, living together in dignity and mutual respect. That was the vision he put out there. And it had to come, and it has to come from both the actions we take in the world. What do? We pass civil rights legislation, or do what we need to do, or elect somebody who's going to, you know, party or people who are going to move things in a better direction. But it also fundamentally depends on training our own heart, on transforming our own heart. And so he says, the end is reconciliation. The end is the creation of the beloved community. It's this type of spirit and this type of love that can transform opposers into friends. You know, so the goal be not to defeat, you know, the people that we're opposing, you know, as though they're them, because what happens is we just keep that cycle of suffering going, you know, as the Who said in the song, you know, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. You know, we just keep reproducing, you know, this team wins or this group wins. And so he talks about love, and he says, the type of love that I stress here is not eros, a sort of aesthetic or romantic love. It's not philia, a sort of reciprocal love between personal friends. But it's agape. Agape is a Greek word, which is understanding goodwill for all people. Agape. It's an overflowing love which seeks nothing in return. And in the language of Christianity puts it, it's the love of God working in the lives of men. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization. So think of this, what he's saying, this agape, this selfless love for others, as really not different in any material way from loving kindness and from the heart practices of Buddhism. It's the same sense that it's not about getting something, or not about, having something, or having somebody give something back to us. It's not that kind of love. It's wishing well to all beings. As far as I can see, that agape is very, very similar to the Buddhist understanding of loving kindness, or metta. This is the love that may well be the salvation of our civilization. And I think that sense of, if we don't bring this dimension of inner transformation and the vision of a solution being including everybody, then we will just continue to play out these cycles of violence and conflict that just perpetuate. Only they perpetuate with weapons that are ever more dangerous and deadly, and consequences for the earth that are ever more catastrophic, in relation to what we're doing with the climate. So what Martin Luther King is arguing for is, like, we bring love in as a key part of our attempt to transform the society and the world. This is fundamental, and I'm going to go on in a few minutes to talk about King as a bodhisattva in the Buddhist tradition. But I just say a few more words about kind of the understanding of this bodhisattva path. Jack Kornfield, in his book The Wise Heart, a wonderful book, and a wonderful teacher, he speaks about three qualities that the bodhisattva has. He says, first one is really to accept the truth of our situation as it is. So here we are today with the blank, blank, blank storm that we're in the middle of. And, we might want to say, well, it shouldn't be like this. This is terrible. It's awful. I wish it weren't like this. We could kind of get into, and we could get into, how terrible it is and how disastrous it is, and all of these stories in the mind. And that wouldn't do us a lot of good. It would kind of probably make us individually feel kind of deflated and despairing, and wouldn't do very much good for the world. So the bodhisattva vision is just to accept the truth of our situation. To acknowledge, yes, this is not how I wanted this moment to be, or this time to be, and yet this is how it is. In the Carlos Castaneda books, Don Juan, the kind of sorcerer, shaman figure, he says, the ordinary person sees everything as a blessing or a curse. Oh, this is wonderful. Oh, this is terrible. We kind of get thrown backwards and forwards between these. And he says, for the spiritual warrior, which is another way of saying the bodhisattva, the spiritual warrior sees everything as a challenge. So if we look at everything as a challenge, of this situation, we have another thing that happens that we say, oh no, he's not doing that, or they're not doing that. Then we said, rather than getting kind of shutting down or whatever we might do, despairing, we say, okay, how do I respond? What is a wise way of responding? Both internally, how do I hold this? How do I hold my anger? How do I hold my fear? How do I process it? How do I metabolize it in me? And how do I respond? If I can do something, I can call Congress, or I can go out on a rally, or whatever it might be. What can I do so that we're moving it in a direction that's towards healing, towards greater freedom and greater well-being. So that's the first thing, is to accept the truth of where of this, our situation and where things are, even if it's not, particularly if it's not the way we wanted things to be. The second is to really transform ourselves through our practice, to cultivate practices to let go of unskillful, unwholesome states. If we get caught up in catastrophizing, for example, to be able to see that, of like, oh, my mind is going off and thinking of all these terrible scenarios, but that's not doing me any, it's not being helpful to me. So to practice just to see when the mind goes off and just come back again. Come back and open to, okay, what am I aware of in my body? Probably a lot of tightness to do with the stories in the mind, but letting go of the stories and just coming back. The Buddha spoke about it as abandoning the unskillful, letting go of states of mind and emotions that are not leading us in a helpful direction. Greed, hatred, they're not going to lead us. They're only going to lead us to suffering. So when we experience those mind states and those emotions coming up, we open to them, allow them to be here. We make space for them. This is the heart of our practice, just to allow what's here. Because if we do that, then it doesn't really have any power over us. If fear is present or grief, if we can fully open to the fear, then like a storm, it will come, it'll maybe be very strong for a while, and then it will go. The grief similarly will come, maybe it'll come in waves, and we have to come back and practice with it and be with it, a number of times. But if we kind of get out of our own way, don't get in a struggle with it, hold on to the things we like, push away the things we don't like. If we don't do that, just allow what's here, then everything can come and go in its own time. So abandoning the unskillful, and the other side of that is cultivating qualities that are beneficial, cultivating kindness, cultivating self-compassion. If we are caught up in painful states, to recognize, oh, this is hard. Can I just be with this moment? And we might just drop in some phrases. May I be safe. May I be happy. May I accept myself as I am. May I be kind to myself. And just in this way, cultivating these wholesome practices, we can, what the Buddha talked about it as, we can cultivate the good. We can cultivate an open heart, a spacious heart. So accepting the truth of our situation, transforming our own hearts and minds, cultivating generosity, gratitude, compassion. When we cultivate these qualities, that becomes the tendency of the mind and the heart. The Buddha said, whatever you frequently think about, that becomes the inclination of your mind. So if you spend your day worrying, oh, this is going to happen, no, this is going to happen, then you become a worried person. It doesn't mean that's essentially who you are. It just means that's what you've cultivated. And if you cultivate loving kindness and compassion or gratitude, then those are the qualities that more and more you will embody, you will carry with you into the world. And people will tend to respond. As you know, if you bring a lot of anger in the world, what you'll tend to get back will be kind of fear or anger or similar kind of qualities. But if you bring generosity in the world, it doesn't happen 100%, we know that. But more, that's the tendency. That's, as the Buddha said, the inclination of the mind. And that's kind of how things tend to roll. The more we do that. And that's the path of happiness and well-being. So those are the two first qualities. And the third one is a quality of the Bodhisattva is to envision a path of freedom for herself, her community, or their world. You know, envision actions and a path of liberation. You know, what can I do? There's this lovely phrase that, reflection from Clarissa Pinkola Estes. You know, it kind of responds to the idea that, oh my God, there's so many terrible things to do, I can't do it all. So we get overwhelmed by the fact that we can't do it all and we don't do anything, you know. Oh, that can be the kind of tendency that we get into. And she says, ours is not the task of fixing the entire world all at once, but of stretching out to mend the part of the world that is within our reach. Our task is to mend the part of the world that's within our reach. When I say that, it already makes me feel a little bit more easy. You know, it's kind of like, oh, I don't have to do everything. It's what's within my reach. What's within my reach? It be different from what's within your reach. It might involve going to protests. It might not. It might involve just, is there a family member I can help? You know, it's like, what way can I help to create, you know, the what's his name, Charles Eisenstein, the name of his book was about creating the more beautiful world we know is possible. The more beautiful world we know is possible. What can we do to do that? Excuse me. And Jack says around envisioning, he says, envisioning has enormous power. With our vision and imagination, we can help create the future. We can help create the future. Envisioning sets our direction, marshals our resources, makes the unmanifest possible. So what is our vision of how we can be a bodhisattva in the world? What can we do to help bring more compassion into the world, to respond to suffering? What can, and really it's a question for each one of us, not from a place of should, but what can I do? And what do I want to do? What can I do that's most helpful? And I think that's a really important question for us to reflect on. You know, what is it that I can do? What can help? What can I do to help at this time? And what I want to, in the last minutes of our time of the talk today, I want to focus particularly, first to say, as I said earlier, that we can find, even though the Bodhisattva is an archetype within Buddhism, we find Bodhisattvas everywhere. There's probably people in your own life that you could think about, of like, who are maybe naturally just generous and kind. You know, the key to kind of being a bodhisattva is realizing that we can transform ourselves and we can help bring compassion into the world. We can work to alleviate suffering in the world. And there are people in many, many traditions that we can think of. And I want to focus today on Martin Luther King, and particularly on some of the lessons, just a couple I'll flag, of lessons for us today. I mean, the first one really is that the vision of Dr. King, you know, from the mid-50s and the Birmingham bus boycott in 1955, right through to the end of his life. Really, what he understood clearly, and it's very much in alignment, and you know, I could say it's really an expression of the Bodhisattva path, is to see that the need for both inner and outer transformation, that we need to change ourselves in order to bring about change in the world. Now, his vision was of building a community where everyone could live together in dignity and mutual respect and harmony. A community kind of rooted in non-violence as a way of being. And I want to just share a couple of reflections from him, shared on the beloved community. He talked about a revolution of hope and love. He said what was new about Mahatma Gandhi's movement in India was he mounted a revolution on hope and love, hope and non-violence. This same new emphasis characterized the civil rights movement in our country, dating from the Montgomery bus boycott of '56 to the Selma movement of 1965. We maintain the hope while transforming the hate of traditional revolutions into positive non-violent power. So transforming our own hearts, he says, talking about non-violence, he said, what's central about non-violent resistance is that it avoids not only external physical violence, but also internal violence of spirit. At the center of non-violence stands the principle of love. In struggling for human dignity, the oppressed people of the world must not allow themselves to become bitter or indulge in hate campaigns. To retaliate with hate and bitterness would do nothing but intensify the hate in the world. Along the way of life, someone must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off the chain of hate. This can be done only by projecting the ethics of love to the center of our lives. So it's about transforming our own hearts, through transforming our own hearts, to be able to change the world, to end, for Dr. King, to end the oppression of racial injustice and Jim Crow, which had gone on for almost a century from the time of the Civil War, and prior to that, slavery from the beginning of the colonial period. So recognizing, and a second lesson, I think, that is really important for us when we find ourselves in a very much a kind of a tendency to be an us or them kind of world or vision. The people in power right now in the United States, this current administration, is doing things that are doing things that are anathema, are causing suffering, that are cruel, that are inhuman. And so it's very easy to kind of separate them off and say, okay, these are bad people, these are the other, we have to somehow kind of destroy them or whatever. But as as Martin Luther King says, that if we try to, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, I think in a very memorable quote, he says, if only it were all so simple, if only there were evil people somewhere else, insidiously committing evil deeds, and it was simply necessary to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them. But the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. And who is willing to destroy a piece of their own heart? So recognizing that that we all have within us those seeds of greed and creating harm and violence and cruelty. And so to not make those who are acting unjustly, not make them the object, but make injustice what needs to be addressed and what needs to be changed. So we have to include everyone. So if we think of, where we are today, what would be the vision that includes everyone, that includes, Donald Trump, that includes Elon Musk? And it's probably not an easy thing to do right now to think of that. But if we don't do that, then we will always be perpetuating separation and division. And that kind of will just go on and on. So how do we bring an end to that? It has to be a vision, as Dr. King advanced, a vision of all of us together, a vision of the beloved community, based on love, based on compassion. We have to transform our own hearts. There has to be an inner transformation and the changes in the world. It can't be just one or the other. Kind of the secular folks have tended to focus on, change the institutions, change the laws, change the practices in the world, and kind of ignoring the inner changes. And people coming from a more spiritual perspective had focused more on the inner changes and less on changes in the world. And one of the great things that Martin Luther King did was really to bring those together, to bring together the transformation of one's own heart, but with actions that would bring about real change in the world. And non-violence was at the heart of non-violence was at the heart of the process of change. And he pointed to the changes that had taken place in the 10 years between the mid-50s and mid-60s, resulting in, the legislation, the Voting Rights Law, and the Civil Rights Act, and many other changes. And he said, all of those changes, he said, fewer people have been killed in 10 years of nonviolent demonstrations across the South than were killed in one night of rioting in Watts, in LA. One night of rioting was more than all of the, all of the killings in the civil rights movement, the nonviolent struggle of those years. So how do we, so that really our goal, our path must be to transform our own hearts and to act in the world, with compassion, to alleviate the suffering of the world. I'm just now realizing it's time to finish now. But if anyone is interested, I'm happy to share some of these quotes from Dr. King and about the struggle of those times, and what they have to teach us today. I think the path of the Bodhisattva is one that certainly for me has helped me be less kind of taking things personally, the times we're living in, kind of interpreting it through the lens of I and me and mine, and much more able to kind of see it as this is all of us together. And that was a beautiful thing about the rallies yesterday, is all of us together, that, as one of the signs says, we're strong together, just the power of being together. This is kind of the Bodhisattva vision, and how it can, bring about change, even recognizing that, it's not going to be an easy struggle in the time ahead, but that, but the bodhisattvas around us and that have lived before us, and I, very much highlight Dr. Martin Luther King, can help show us the way, can help show us the possibility of bringing about change in our own hearts and changes in the world.